ahead and get started. I did finally get last week's session. I thought I had just the audio, but I actually do have the video. So I finally got it uploaded to YouTube. I'll send the link out when we're over here. So if anyone who missed last week can go back and watch this week. And then we're recording, just recording each week now. The problem is it just takes a long time because it's a long video to get it uploaded and everything. So that is working though. So my favorite part of this so far is getting to see different rooms of people's houses. I feel like I get like a home tour while we do this. It's awesome. So that Zoom has its benefits. So very cool, very cool. What we'll do today is this one was kind of like a history lesson of how kids are bombarded with so much, and it's technology and media now, but it's always been something, and kind of what are we doing to train them. So we're going to start off nice and easy, and just anything like I've got about 5 or 6 like talk points that we're going to talk about. But anything from videos that stuck out to you guys that you thought, man, this one really hit home with me that we can talk about, that would be great. So go ahead. Who wants to get us started on something they saw in the video or in the questions or the activities that was something that you really thought this week was something that's take home?
Well, this was my jam. I love this kind of thing. I especially love that Kirk Cameron saying, "I believe that children are our future." I mean, that was that reminded me of why I loved it so much. No, but and I guess especially as a teacher, it just kind of wrapped up exactly why I do that, what I do, and how I believe, what I believe about children. But I think also this was one of the more encouraging ones. I mean, not the others are discouraging,
Right.
but it was more, I guess, as a parent to realize, we know as believers that God does have a plan, but to realize that God is putting that and instilling that in kids, even when they're really young, and to just see that in your own kids and to try to mold and shape that when you see that whatever it may be that God has placed in those. I mean, we talk all the time about how different our 3 boys are, but we can see how God is put things in each of them that we pray God will use. Especially the story of David Livingston and those that God put that in their hearts when they were 8 and younger, even though it took a lifetime for that to be developed, he was putting that call in their heart. And I just think that that's one of those things that we need to remember more when we see everything that's going on around us in the world, not to use as discouraging, but to look at what God can do in our kids as the light in the middle of things that are really hard.
Yeah, that was a good one. One of the questions I have that actually this will lead right into it is, you said that you see God working in different ways in each of your kids. And I think we all, as Christ followers, once you kind of start to think how God's developed you, you see different characteristics in your kids and you're like, whoa, that's really God working in there. But honestly, like the question is how do you and your spouse teach your child to listen and obey God's call in their life? So actually, when you see those things, like see how like you're seeing them, and how are you teaching them to follow up on those things? Really, I guess is the question. And then the follow up would be for the rest of us: are we trying to do those things anyway, and what does that look like? So actually, I know for a fact you do talk to your kids about that. So how do you do that? And then the rest of us, like, let's think about what are ways that we can help our kids to understand that.
Well, one good thing, or I think it's hard, but it's good. Chase and I are very, 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 very different. Y'all know that. And we grew up in Christian homes, but we also, those things were not necessarily molded in Chase as they were in me. My parents, took me on mission trips. We sought out ways to serve in the community. And I think that created a mission mindset in me. And so therefore, I wanted to do that in my family. Chase would not be molded that way. We say a lot of times, he has a burden for discipling believers, but I definitely have more of a missions heart, and I would rather go outside the church. And so because we see things two different ways, I think that allows us to then see different things in our kids. So for me, I just constantly like to find ways that we can serve as a family. Now, all three of my kids are different, and like my middle child would be out there, he would never meet a stranger, and he loves it. My oldest child doesn't really want to talk to people by doing that, but he genuinely loves helping with kids. That's different. He'll play with the kids, he'll hold the kids, and then when we're back at home, like one of the things of all three of my kids, my oldest would be the one that says he's sad when we don't get to do it, like not getting to go on family mission trips. Like he will express that he's sad not to get to do that. So I think with those little comments, that sometimes they don't know that that's God putting them in their heart. So you have to say, well, if you would like that, what are some other things that you might want to do? You want to volunteer at Bible school? Do you want to, what do you want to do? And so I think you have to discern it for them and kind of give them more opportunities so that they will listen to it. Another thing, I had already thought that I was going to share these with us, but this is actually a wonderful, wonderful time to do this. I don't know if any of you ever seen these books. They are from Family Life, but they are different characteristics. And they actually have stories just like that guy on that one video talked about, actual character traits that you want to see in your kids. And so some of them are missionary stories and some of them are more historical stories like he shared. But we had gratitude. Gratitude was the first one we had. And it's supposed to be just 1 week. But we're actually doing this with our Sunday school class of adults so that they can help figure out what it looks like to do it with their children. But you found them on Amazon now, but courage, truth, which is really good, truth right now, forgiveness, and like I said, compassion. And then, but gratitude was the one we started with, and it helped give you ways to see that in your kids. Another good resource is The Family God Uses, which is Henry Blackaby. And I don't know if it's Henry, it's one of the sons, y'all might know, it's the sons of the Blackaby. And they wrote it telling how they were all of the Blackaby kids grew up to be ministers or used in some way. And people had asked them, how did y'all all grow up to have a heart for that? And he said, well, so the way our family worked as a unit. And they talk about things like their dad having to go out on visits and not leaving them at home, but taking the kids with them and making it more of a family event, and not my dad had to go, but my dad gets to do this and we did it together. And there were some really good examples in that of how to kind of see that as a family. So that's the end of my advertisement. But
no, those are great. That's awesome resources. Just so you know, we really missed y'all last week. We have a lot of there was a lot of questions I wanted to go over. Some people who had some older kids last week, just because it lent itself, and we only had some of our younger. So I was like, man, where's our older kid parents? We need some more. But it's okay, we'll catch up. So
you needed more old people.
Yeah.
Oh, so it wasn't about what I did. Yeah. Was it about technology and how we make mistakes with technology?
Well, some of it was like transitioning, how you transition to when they're older. Like one thing was, like as they get older, you're not going to have a 17 or 18-year-old where you say, come lock your phone in my room. Eventually, you're going to have to get to where you can trust them with their device. Like things
like our situation we ran in with ours is I don't know if all of y'all know that my oldest son, he's 16, but he's also type 1 diabetic. And so his insulin pump, what is it? What word am I missing?
Is it linked to the phone?
It links to it. Okay, so I can check what his sugar is at any time, but I can only do that if a certain app is open and it's within a certain distance from him. So he has to have his in his room, and that is very, very, very hard. It's hard for the other kids too. I mean, they understand that he definitely got more technology privileges because of that, but that's a hard transition too. Like, which one's more important? Which am I weighing? But like you said, you have to eventually in that too. But yeah, that's a harder one.
Yeah.
But it is kind of but then also those things mean a lot more to them when they get older. So for him, it's not just taking that away, but he has car keys and other things that are responsible too. So it's a big domino effect that he doesn't want to have taken away. So I feel like if they can handle it and you can trust them, then it's a great responsibility to be able to put the responsibility on them to monitor it.
Right. Awesome.
I'll put
What else are some other things? How do you teach your child and listen to obey God's call on their life? Because it seems like a simple question, but I think it's a very hard, like when I see families, I see some families that it comes very easy. I see some families, this is very hard. And I think it depends a lot on how we were personally raised. Like Ashley was saying, she's raised a little different than Chase. For instance, like the Blackaby family you mentioned, we got to go on a mission trip with one of the Blackaby, I guess he's one of the kids, well, he's a grandchild of William and them. So he's like 20. And I got to see firsthand, it was like you talk to him and it's a way of life. It's how they do life, and that's how it was. They had God conversations all the time. So he was raised like that. Well, when I was growing up, see, my mom's on here right now. And when I was older, she might have had a conversation with me about, like, when I was thinking about school, it was, Evan, do you think God wants you to go to seminary? When I was 8, 9, 10, she wasn't going, Evan, who do you think God wants you to choose as your friends? Like, that wasn't part of our conversation. But in a way, part of me thinks the sooner that's part of your conversation, the easier these are to start stressing that with your kids. So what are some other ways y'all do that? Like, what are some situations you run into where you bring it up? Like, actually, y'all's were all kind of like a mission type thing. When do you bring these things up with your kids, and how do you do it is my question. Or do you do it?
We also just talked about, this is a good thing, we were talking to Guy about the things he likes to do and thinking about college, what do you want to do with it in the future? And I said, this is probably beginning of quarantine. I said, Guy, have you sat down and prayed about what God wants you to do with your life? And he was like, like college and future? And I said, yes. And he said, no. And so Chase and I had different situations. And I said, well, that's a big deal. Pray about it so that God opens the doors and have peace about it, talk about that. And I said, Chase, did you pray about that for college? And he said, I'll be honest with you, I didn't. He said, I didn't pray when I went to college. He said, it was the best offer. I didn't have a peace about it, and if you know Chase's story. And I said, well, it's half joking, half not. I said, well, maybe if you had prayed about it, you wouldn't have been 33 when God called you into ministry. And so it was kind of a laughing point, but not really a laughing point.
Right.
That sometimes you do need to kind of open that and have that, conversation. So, it doesn't even have to be big, serious things, but for them to know that prayer needs to be a part of it. You assume your kids know that prayer should be a part of it.
Right.
But they don't always know that.
No.
I'll give you a statement that a good buddy of mine does, and it's actually for his ministry. He works with college students. And so their vision for their college ministry is do what you're good at for the glory of God, somewhere strategic for the mission of God. And so we're praying that over Tate already. Do what you're good at for the glory of God, somewhere strategic for the mission of God. And so, honestly, I'm a weird person. As Ashley said, her and Chase are so different. Me and Kimberly are really different people. Not in a bad way, but I'm just different as an individual on my likes and dislikes and all that mess. I think, and I'm going to struggle with this, and I'd love to hear you guys as parents talk to this. Notions of expectations for your children on what they do in their life. And I love this right here, because what are your children good at? And then how can they do that strategically for the Lord, honestly? And my buddy has to counsel a lot of college students who want to come into college as doctors, lawyers, make a crap ton of money. And he says, you're not good at any of that stuff. What are you good at? And then how can you use what you're good at for the Lord himself? Missionally. So just something to write down, something to ponder, something to think through and pray through for your children, honestly, on praying that specifically for them.
I know some of y'all model that like in prayer times, like with your kids. Like that's another way to do it, is when you're praying, you show them to pray about even the littlest thing, because You want them to be doing what God wants them to do, not what they want to do. And when we teach kids about prayer, we explain to them, like, part of our prayer model is yielding to God, but it's very hard concept for kids to understand, honestly. And so, like, for me at home, it's when they like something that I try and interject that. Like, the big decision for Noah right now is he's fixing to start school again. And when he does, you can't play two specific things. And he likes them both. His friends are all playing one, but he likes to do the other. And so he's got to make a decision on what he wants to do because you can only do one. And then we're trying to explain, like, it doesn't matter. Do one this year, the next is fine. And then finally today, yesterday, I was like, no, you should just pray about it. God might have a specific plan for you to be on one of those teams this year for a specific person. You don't know, and that's never even run through his mind at this point. For this point, it's just been, what are my friends doing? What am I going to like better? But you want to keep that mindset in front of them. And that's a way to do that. Don't be afraid to pull it in on even little decisions. What are other things that y'all have? Is prayer the time when y'all try and do that? Or have y'all, like, someone else speak out on that? Like, do you do that? Is that even in your mindset? Or was this something that is, like, new that you're going to start trying? What do you think?
I'd say for us, it's something new and trying.
Yeah.
Our daughter's 11, our only child, and she's gone through, first wanting to be a dolphin trainer and now to be, we've never really thought about, having to start praying about what would God want you to do.
Right.
Well, I think for us, it's just, I feel like a lot of times on the outside, like as a parent, you can kind of see what your kids are good at more better than they can. So I think for us, we just try to, like, tell them, you're really good at such and such, or you're really good at this. And so like Ansley she's an encourager. I mean, that's just what she is. And so, like, she doesn't have a lot of, they're in the next room, so she might hear me, but, like, she's not fantastic at sports, like things that people get complimented on, the outside abilities. She's not that great at those things. But, like, I always try to tell her that, like, you have good character traits that can be used really well for the Lord.
Yeah. One thing that will help y'all figure out these things to encourage your kids, I'll send it to you at the end of this. I've been doing some research on trying to do some spiritual disciplines for kids, like, because you get that a lot with youth and adults, and I'm trying to make, like, a kid's version. But one thing is understanding their spiritual gifts. And there's one super easy spiritual gifts test I was looking at the other day, which was basically like, what are they good at? And I'm like, oh, it's really that easy. Like, and then encouraging them in that. And so I'll send y'all a link to something like that. But I think when you find those things, encouraging them to say, okay, let's listen to God in this area, and then that rolls into, because if you're doing the things they like, it becomes easier than to take the weirdest thing that they're dealing with and do it. They'd be like, I don't even understand how that works with God. But if you're doing with things they like, it's gonna carry over to the other areas. But I think a lot of that is us doing that. And I think, to me, the part of the video that makes it even harder in that session was, am I counting on God for all areas? And am I doing the same thing? You know what I mean? And so if I am, then I can easily model that. But if I'm not, then I'm telling them to do something I'm not doing. So it gets tough. All right.
Yeah, Evan, I'd speak to that too. What you just said about the spiritual gifts thing is, I know for me, until I was in my mid to late 20s, I didn't know what any of the spiritual gifts were. So I didn't really realize what I couldn't have ever told my kids what their spiritual gifts were, or even helped them find them, because I didn't know them myself. So I would encourage all of you parents to take a spiritual gifts inventory. That's something that we've really prided ourselves on at Concord over the last 10 years, was to make sure all of our folks know what they're good at. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of things you may be good at that you don't even know, just like your kids don't know. So I would suggest that all you take one so that you can help your kids and guide them in a direction too.
And us mentioning that we're different is a very important thing, because I am very guilty of feeling that people should serve the way I serve, and the way that I am convicted to serve, and the way that I'm passionate about. But Chase and I are very different, and our kids are very different. And so it would be unfair for me to expect them to all serve the same way. And it's not going to happen that way. And I don't want to talk down to one child by comparing them to another just because their gifts are different. And that could happen so many times in our household, having some children that like the attention and one that doesn't want any attention. Although God's going to use him equally as he's going to use the other two, but it doesn't mean that it's going to look the same way. And may even be, more impactful, in 20 years. But we have to make sure that he sees how God can use him more than the others, even though some kids are more spotlight kids, or just naturally step in. I mean, our whole family served, helped Bill a couple weeks ago with the senior adult luncheon, and that's not something that one of my kids is very comfortable with. Older people walking around talking to them, that was not his thing. But he would love holding kids and walking around and doing that with them, and it's okay. That's okay. Is to say, find the ways that you're the most comfortable with. Your spiritual gift is going to line up in something that you enjoy doing, that you feel comfortable. That's why you enjoy doing it. And just be, don't make it look the same way that your gift looks, I guess.
Yeah. It's very awkward and weird when your kids are a lot different than you and your spouse in a way, because in a way that's uncharted territory for y'all. So you don't know, what do I do with it? Naturally a lot of their gifts are very similar to ours, but it's like you said, Ashley, sometimes you have some specific characteristics or things that you're not used to dealing with. And it's not like you just throw those under the rug. That's who God made them to be. And you got to figure out how to encourage them to let God use those without your experience. And that's the scary part. Switching gears just a little, because a lot of our questions are kind of go back to this kind of overall theme we're going with now, but I do want to get this other one in because we have two major themes. Okay. The other one is Dr. Foster said that what goes into the eyes and ears of our children will impact their spiritual lives forever. Does it change the way you think about their use of social media and technology, and how does that change it?
Yeah, I think the part when he was talking about Hitler and kind of brainwashing, the young children, he said something about capturing their hearts will control their minds, and I immediately think about the social media and just what access they have on that device as, okay, some stranger is capturing our children's heart, and we don't know what that's going to control. So that's the scary part. But then on the positive part is that we do have control and can have impact on the direction that because we can control their time. We control the content through activities at church and then through our personal time with them. And so there's a lot of teaching moments. I think earlier Ashley said you teach the lesson when it's applicable, so that way it sinks in more. So when we see a situation, don't wait for Sunday to talk about it. Talk about it right then and bring up the scripture that balances the truth and gives us the roadmap of how we should respond. So I think that's important. But the comment he made about brainwashing, and that's really what's happening, right? In their minds are either going to be used for good or evil, and we obviously want to be good, but the sinful nature comes into it, right? And that's the part that is powerful. And I keep thinking about how Hitler, it's such evil, right? But they were captivated by his teachings, and then they obeyed him more than their family. So it's powerful.
Evan, did you see that video I sent you? I pinned you on Facebook. There was one, it was someone from Kentucky. It was a family, a mom and a dad, and they were discussing how something had popped up, a commercial on just a simple kids game had come up with their child. And every time that the child knew better, knew something was wrong. So it came to the parents tried to get it to come up, could not get it to come up. They put a picture from another phone in front of it of their daughter who was young, and some inappropriate video came up or commercial came up. Right. Then they ended up the next day getting the child to pull up the phone, and the commercial came immediately on. So it was actually targeting that young child.
Right.
And that was scary to me. I tell Janie, more Janie than Gracie, because Janie's on technology more than Gracie, you can't unsee something. Yeah. And that is my biggest fear, is what is in front of them and what's coming on just a commercial on a game of blocks or ball jumping thing or something. It's
Right.
just, and so it's, I don't know, that really just bothered me tremendously, because I'm like, there's intention on the other side, and we have to be intentional with our children, and we have to use those opportunities we have to share with them, and have to be so careful
Right.
with what they see. So anyway, that's it.
No, I didn't actually see that, but that goes back to like what we talked a little bit about last week with, and I brought those books up about the pornography, saying, if you see, like, that kid obviously did know to go tell, like, they saw that ad and told the parent, this is crazy, this is wrong, which is what the kid is supposed to do. And you're right, you can't unsee it. And unfortunately, that's where we're at. That is right where we're at. So, but what others have y'all thought about? Has that maybe adjusted the way you would think about social media, knowing that it pulls away or it's pulling away from God, or it could be used for evil? What have y'all thought about that? And has that made any adjustments, or does that just automatically go into what you're thinking?
I know for us, I kind of talk to my boys about it. Since I have all boys, it's easier to have those father-son conversations with them about the temptations that are out there for men on the internet and those sorts of things. Even at their age, one of them's in the prime season, the other ones are coming right behind him. So I told them, I actually spoke, and Evan, you've done this, I think, before too, maybe, to the boys at Calhoun, where Ashley teaches, for like a boys group there one time. And it was talking about like your thoughts and your where you are mentally and what you occupy your mind with. And I told them the story of when Microsoft was first beginning, and I explained to them, I'm so old that when computers came out, they were huge, and those computers we had when I was in elementary school were like gigantic. And I kind of made a joke about it, but I told about how Microsoft developed the computer and the programming and everything that went into it. And I told them about a term that Microsoft coined back in the late 70s, early 80s called GIGO, G-I-G-O. And I asked them what they thought that meant. Nobody could guess it. But basically what it means is garbage in, garbage out. And I told them they used that term or that phrase when they were programming their computers and getting everything right, that if they made a mistake putting things into the computer, they got mistakes when things came out of the computer. So I asked them, who's smarter, the man or the computer? And they were all like, well, computers don't make mistakes. And I was like, well, a computer doesn't make a mistake as long as the man who's programming that computer doesn't make a mistake. But if they put garbage in, even the computer will put garbage out. And I use that to show them that whatever comes into us is what comes out of us. If we're allowing garbage in through the internet, through YouTube or whatever it is, chances are that same garbage will eventually come back out. And I used it for, like their language, the words they choose, but just the way we treat people. I mean, if you're watching people mistreat other people and you think that's funny and you're watching videos, sooner or later, you're going to start mistreating people. Or if you're watching something with foul language, sooner or later, those words are going to come out of your mouth. So I told my boys about that after I told the boys at Calhoun about it. And so now if anything ever comes up around our house, we just kind of yell out GIGO. And if that means that we need to shut it down, turn it off, it's nothing ever good. You can't have garbage in and not have the garbage. It's got to come back out somehow, some way. So we just try to cut off the garbage from coming in to begin with. So GIGO has become our keyword, I guess.
Yeah.
We even said that at a baseball field.
Yeah, and that's true. We even had a teaching, kind of a celebration moment when they were doing things at the baseball field, and some kids were saying things they weren't supposed to say, and Noah's over there yelling GIGO. A coach was saying things, and Noah's over there yelling GIGO, GIGO. But even nobody knew what it meant, but we did. And he was like, "We got to remove ourselves from the situation," which was great. But I just hope our kids are strong enough to do that as they get older, and the peer pressure and all that comes. You still got to remind yourself that if I'm letting it in, sooner or later it's going to overflow and it's going to come back out. So be careful what you're letting in.
That's good. One of the follow-ups on the page of like extras was a focus on the family link, but it's unlinked because the study's like 2 or 3 years old, and obviously now all this stuff is unlinked already. So if you go back and try and find that link, I'm going to send it to you. I found it, and I'm going to send it to y'all after, so you don't have to go looking for it. But now it's through the Plugged In ministry, and it's about technology, and it's about just how things work now. And in that, part of it is it's a bunch of great articles that are all brand new. I mean, it's got stuff on a Nintendo Switch. It's got stuff on everything that's current, which is good to help us. But one of the things it talked about, and this is where I think about this, is when I think about the way that they use social media and technology. Last week I told y'all some things can bring them closer to God or further from God. And I look at the things my kids watch, and I think to myself, all right, Noah's watching some basketballs videos. That's what he likes to watch. Is that bringing him further away from God? Not necessarily. Is it bringing him real close to God? Not necessarily. And I'm like, I don't know what to do about that one. And then Lainey's watching, literally, like today I watched some videos with her that were like Roblox kids making smoothies at the beach. And I'm like, was this really away from God? No. Oh, making a smoothie is okay. Going to the beach is okay. Like, and I'm like, is it going towards God? No, not really. Like, it's kind of like a middle road. And so, like, to me, my goal obviously is for my kids not to be watching trash on here that's going to be like the garbage. But what I have a lot of trouble is what I call this mid-level stuff that's not bringing them real close to God, and they're just wasting their time on it. And so what this article talked about was, it talked about how Paul in Ephesians said, pay careful attention then to how you live, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of time because the days are evil. So don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. And that talks about making the most of our time and using our time effectively for God. So then when I look at it out of that lens, I'm like, well, these smoothies on the beach aren't really effective for God. Like in these basketball videos, you're not going pro. So this really isn't effective for God either. Like these are just fun time killers. But then I go back to how much time are they spending doing those things when they could be doing something that could be more Christ-like, or more drawing them towards God. So it talks about that term, though, is being caught in a neutral zone. So it talks about how in media you have these things that are a neutral zone, and it's not bad and it's not good, but it's too much of a neutral zone, a bad thing. And to me, that's where I'm just like, ooh, neutral zone. That's where we're at, So it's something good to just keep in mind as you're thinking about, as you're processing your kids' media, how much of it is neutral, how much of it is evil, like literal, just evil, like you talking about, Chase, you brought up like, yelling at kids and doing things. And you watch a few shows, and this is more like television, and the attitudes of kids on shows, you're like, I don't want my kid acting like that. So then that goes from neutral to out of there, and you got to stay on this stuff like crazy. Okay. So that's just, I thought I'd share that. And then the other verse that went with that is Romans 12:12 about not being conformed to the ways of the world, but renew your mind so you can discern what is good, what's pleasing, what's perfect. How that contrast is that we need to be continually being shaped by the truth and not in that neutral zone. So that's just some encouragement for you guys I know it's hard to stay on top of what they're watching and what they're doing, but neutral is not a bad thing, but I think too much of neutral is. And if we're not using some push towards better things that we could be doing for God, that's where we need to shift gears. Because the rest of this lesson talked about, it said, do you believe the way you train your child now can actually make a kingdom-sized impact on them and future generations? And how does it change your role as a parent? So in that question, how many of y'all in that part, when I think this was the video where he talked about he's ready to like charge like the battlefield with his parents, and he might have talked about that in another one. But as a parent, when I think about those responsibilities, like I know y'all said this is a encouraging one, but to me, that's something that I feel like, oh, we got a big responsibility and we got to train our kids to be that way. So what are some, do y'all parent with that viewpoint, or is that a new one, or what are some ways you think you can do that?
I think just one comment before that, Evan, was you talk about neutral, and I think about, anything in excess, right? So it may start out neutral, but then it becomes a little bit more, and then all of a sudden you're addicted. And that's just speaking to parents too, right? Whatever you put in, it becomes an idol, right? And so we all know what an idol above God in the time, seek him first in the kingdom of God. And so if that neutral thing, you're asking the question, is it good or evil? If it's neutral, but yet we end up spending more and more time with it. So I'll think about sports. For me, I'm a big sports fan, but I like watching Twitter and following sports teams. But if I end up spending too much time on it, it becomes addictive, and I put that as a priority above my daily devotion time, right? And so that becomes bad. So it's not at neutral can very quickly, that's where the devil gets a foothold. And so I think that's where we have to be cautious, is that, as earlier said, once the mind is captured, it becomes, and I think I mentioned this on the first call, is that our kids become little gremlins sometimes when they're on that device too long. And also, and I think it's part of that addictive nature that they are now beyond neutral. They are captivated, and they want one more show. And that part of it is very dangerous. So ideally we'd all like to have them on things that are building themselves up and others up. But I could say the same thing for my life. So I can't be hypocritical in that, because I choose a lot of things that are downtime or sports related that have nothing to do with, growing in Christ specifically or directly. But we need to be examples of our time allocation and the things that we do too, because we can very easily be susceptible to the same things that they are.
Well, Michael, he doesn't have the issue I have. I struggle. I look at my phone too much. I look at social media. I don't post much, but I look and I know what everybody's doing. And I can totally be affected by it mentally, because, okay, well, this mom right here has it all together, and I am a piece of work. I'm just messed up. I'm not doing anything with my kids. I am a failure. Or I can see, these people are doing Rodin and Fields. Oh, I need to look better. I need to look younger. I mean, there's one thing after another, and it can get me down. And so I can speak with my kids from personal experience. You don't need to do this, because I know that I have an addictive behavior, tendency with social media or with the phone, and you can too. And so even like I remember when Michael put YouTube Kids on the kids' phones, and I'm like, no, don't dare do that. I'm like, no, they don't even need to be starting that, because I struggle. And so anyway, we got to the point of encouraging them to do Right Now Media and having that as a resource. Now, have we gone back and do they watch a little tic-tac-toe, and do they watch people open stuff and watch the YouTube family? Yes. So, it's cyclical. We learn, and, we'll do good for a while, and then we'll go fall back. But it's something I struggle with, and I know how it affects me emotionally. It can get me like in a bad, and I'll tell Michael, I was like, I can tell the kids have been on the phones too much or on technology too much, because they are grumpy. But anyway, but it's the same thing when you're in the Word. Oh my goodness, it just changes your outlook, and it's just, you feel like you can charge hell with a water gun. Yeah. So.
Go, Terry. You got to unmute. I'll unmute her. Ma, unmute. Oh, geez.
I got it. You got me? Can you hear me?
Yay!
Okay. Sorry. When I see and this is mainly, I guess, in the older children, for the YouTube, and they're following these families or following these sports figures. And to me, it is so much like a soap opera, because they do really begin to believe this is the way people live their lives. And in reality, that's not the way those people live their lives in the real world. But then you begin to think, well, this, or the children, I loved soap operas at one point in my life, and I really had the mindset that's the way people lived. And to me, this is, Emin, this is such a parallel.
Yeah.
Because I do believe they believe that's the way people live, and that's what they should be doing, if they're not directed otherwise.
Terry,
It's
I
just my
totally
thought.
agree.
Miss Terry, preach, yes.
Because our kids think we should do the 24-hour challenge where we're in the bathroom, we get so many items, go into the bathroom. And I'm like, these people get paid to play with their kids and do these challenges all the time. And that is their life. And we slept. We were in the bathroom for 24 hours almost, I think. I get it. They do. They think that's truth.
Or Ainsley was giving me updates on this little family she followed. And I'm like, Ainsley, we don't know them. Like, I do not care what these people are doing. We don't know them. Stop. But yeah, it's like she thinks we care about them because there are these people who put their lives on YouTube.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I just wanted to also say was, when you think about your own life, where you are now in your life, and think about how the kinds of things now that you find acceptable, that when you were a child being brought up, it was not a thing you'd want to be involved with at all. Or, you would think it wasn't right or moral or whatever, but you've been desensitized. And so now, at this point in your life, what you once thought was a big deal is no longer a big deal. And so if you just think that, and we're adults, and we have some control over that part of our hearts and our minds. But if it has affected us as adults, Christian adults, who do have control, hopefully, over our thoughts and our minds and can reel ourselves back in, what are our children are at such risk in their generation when they reach your age, particularly, and what has been dumped into their brains and their hearts. That's it.
A verse that comes to mind when you say that, Terry, is, making every thought captive and obedient to Christ. And, and I'm speaking specifically to me, right? So if I have a thought in my head, you don't linger on it, you move on, make it obedient to Christ. And if we teach our children that, that's a great biblical principle that can help in that. It's that desensitized. We see it all the time. And it's like, there's a song, Slow Fade by Casting Crowns. And it talks about that. There's no longer black and white, there's gray, and that gray becomes part of the new norm or the new acceptable behavior when it's really not. And so that it's a very powerful song. I'd recommend listening to it again. It has a lot of things that just repeat over and over, that's what happens when you linger and you don't make your thoughts obedient to Christ.
Well, I think too, we as parents have got to stay on top of things too, because when Janie's our 10-year-old, when she was growing up, Doc McStuffins was the show for her. Well, then they introduced a same-sex couple across the street that became norm. And if I had not been looking at Million Moms, I wouldn't have known about that. Or Arthur with the
teacher.
Yes, thank you. The cartoon Arthur, about what's going on there, and different movies. Well, you don't want to see this or that sort of thing, because you don't have to go to those things, and you don't have to let them watch certain things. And so, it also offered an opportunity for me to tell Janie, okay. She was like, why can't we watch Doc McStuffins anymore? Why can't we watch Andy? I forget what it was. It's on Nickelodeon. Anyway, Andy Mack. Why can't we do this? And so it offered an opportunity a little bit earlier than I wanted to, but they're exposed to things way earlier with same-sex couple parents in class and different things. That's just one aspect, but they're exposed to these things so early that it gave me an opportunity to share. So we had that talk before we had the talk, but we as parents need to stay up on things, and that's one good resource is Million Moms, and it's on they'll email you, and they're on Facebook, and you can follow them, and it's just a good resource. They're also a very big advocate for certain things, and they have like a lobbying arm that will try to sway things from going too far gone.
So let me go back to that other question real quick, because we've talked about a lot of things. But let me think about this one, because we're on more of the protection mode and the this is awful. Our kids are like getting exposed to the worst thing in the world, which they are in a lot of ways. And honestly, one thing I meant to add on was I feel a lot more for girls than I do for boys with media and social media, because like if Noah's friend says something about him on social media, which even if they did, like Noah's really, his network is pretty small. It's pretty much, because when I talked to him about, no, what would you do if someone ever like said something real crazy? You think you'd ever snap back at him? Because he had a friend who like had gotten like a friend altercation where they're saying things back and forth. I'm like, no, what do you do if someone ever says anything on your wall like that's negative? And he goes, well, who would do that, first of all? And like, I probably wouldn't even care, because most of his people are his closest friends. He doesn't have a huge amount of friends, but this person did. But then I think to myself, boys, they kind of like, okay, who cares? You're stupid. And it's over in 1 second. But girls, good gravy. The nightmare of social media is 100 times worse, because they're thinking about what they look like on there. It's like you just covered it, Wendy, and everything you said about as a mom. You think about that as a mom. Well, think about a 9 or 10-year-old who wants to be popular and wants to be cool, and her friends are doing this. It's a nightmare, social media. And so I get it. That's why I feel like, those are the ones that need this extra encouragement, and those are the ones that need more encouragement, because there's going to be some negative out there, but switching gears back. So here's the one thing I want you to think about. Because, I'm older now. When I was younger, until I started thinking about how God would use me, luckily for me, I had some friends around me that God has used in some really cool ways. And so I never thought even the people that I'm surrounded by when I was 18, 19, 20 would be used by God in a way they are. Like by God using them to help reach people and things like that. Some of them are pastors, some of them are missionaries. But when we think about that, to me, that's kingdom impact that kids are making. And like, I know some of y'all, even in this thing, have already talked to me personally about your kids possibly having a kingdom impact, a very large one when they're older. And so, but that doesn't start unless we start having kingdom impact conversations. And so I think the encouragement for me in that is you have got to, we, myself included, have got to get involved in God in the conversation, and as many conversations as we can have with our kids. Some of it's going to be natural ebb and flow, but to me, because I'm a minister, I naturally have an advantage to have a God conversation with my kid. Most of my life and my job revolves around ministry. But if I wasn't a minister, what would that look like? How, how would I engage in those conversations? And so for that, how do some of you guys do that? Like, how do y'all jump into those? What are ways you do it? Your turn.
Well, I think the way we live our life is God's not a part of our life. God is our life. And
Right.
it is just an integral part of, it is who we are. It is what we are. It's what we do. And it's him working in us. And so, but I think I told Michael, I was like, we got to let Janie watch the end of this video. This is just like one of those, like,
Right.
But I think so many times I get in defensive mode. I get into protection mode and try to protect instead of try to let them know God's got great things in store for you. Instead of the old legalistic side of me of don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. I need to say, God has equipped you for this. And we talk about it a lot in just gifts of the fact that they have musical ability, and Janie and there is nothing greater than us riding down the road and both of them starting to sing praise and worship songs and them talking about, oh, we need to do this at church. And, that's just a little practical thing. But and one other thing was, we were, my kids, just like me, get in the me mode of, I feel, and this isn't going good, or this. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe we need to be thinking about that senior adult that's at home that has nobody to play with. They don't even have a sister that's following you around. They don't even have somebody to talk to, And so I was like, well, why don't we use your artistic ability? You love to draw. Let's do something and send them a card or something like that. And they've done that some during this time, or call someone. And so just trying to think of ways to get beyond me.
I think the same practical thing is like in prayer request time at night, very simple prayer, right? Not very long, but when they bring something up, talk about it and explain, why are we praying for this person? Or get them not thinking about themselves. We're so inherently selfish. Once again, myself speaking too, right? We're selfish in nature. And so it's real easy sometimes to think about how it impacts me or what's going on, but especially from a kid's perspective, they are very self-centered and focused on everything, how it affects them. Sister, they're worried about themselves and not the other person. But talking about the prayer requests and then opening their eyes to more things than just their small circle. But bring it up intentionally and in a practical way. I think it's helpful, at least as a talking point anyway, to get the conversation going.
Awesome. Prayer time is perfect. That's a great one, Mike. Because if that's something you're not doing with your kids, we've talked in this class to know that that's the easiest way to start things off and get it going for me, because prayer is not complicated. It doesn't have to be this big thing. I'll add, in addition to this, I'll put on here to send out you the pray thing that I send all the kids. A lot of y'all have it, but some of y'all don't. It talks about just praise, which is first started out with praising God. Then requests, which are questions we ask. Then ask on behalf of someone else, and then yield to God. And it's just a little thing that goes over how to do that. I'll add 2 things on for you guys. That way, if you aren't doing that, it's something you can start doing. And that, Mike, is a great way to start those God questions and get them thinking about how God works in their life. And then from that point, you start pushing to bigger things. And then eventually, my goal is for my kids' lens not to be, what does Noah Dixon want to do and what does Lainey Dixon want to do? It's, what does God want me to do? And that's what I want to follow. And that's my goal as a parent, is to get them there. It's a long road. We're nowhere near that road right now. But I only have 7 years left with Noah till he is out of here, and so,
we talked earlier about, praying for guidance or discernment, right? And not as a last resort, but as a first resort. That should be, where do I go here? What direction? What way? Where do I go? And teaching them that needs to be the first thought, not, okay, I don't know what else to do, I might as well pray. Not the last resort, but he is our guide, and he's the one that's going to tell us and give us discernment where to make that decision. So it's something we need to teach.
And another practical thing we did was do a chalkboard, like just one of those pretty chalkboards, and we would write the names on there so that the kids could see how the prayer requests were answered. And that way they see that prayer works. And it may not always be the way we want it answered, but God answers prayer.
Yeah.
Just a practical thing for them to follow.
Ashley, your teacher fingers up. You ready?
Yeah. Talking about prayer, but seeing how you use that with your child. Those of you who know our children, our middle son, Eli, when he was in elementary school, he really struggled with anger, especially on the basketball court. And he gets that honest, just getting excited and getting really fueled. But one of the things that convicted me of that was when he started doing theater and other things, every time he went for an audition or for a show, we stopped and we prayed together. And we would always pray for his peace, pray for his nerves, pray for God to use him for his glory. And that's just always been what we've done. Like, even it's just part of our routine that I'm always the one that takes him, and we have that time together. And I realized that we never did that for his sports. And we're putting him in this high energy, lots of an emotional situation, and just throwing him as a child out there in a situation and expecting a lot from him when he was, 9-10 years old. And one day, it wasn't me that was convicted of that, but he said, "Mama, can we pray before my basketball game?" And when he said that, it made me realize that we were putting expectation on him that he wasn't ready for, and that the way to fix it wasn't telling him to calm himself down, wasn't saying you need to work on this, but it was, really giving it to God and saying, God, help me work on this, and letting him see that. But one of the things, talking about having a kingdom mindset, is one of the things that I feel really burdened about is that having 3 boys, and I don't know what it's like to have 3 girls or 2 girls or 1 girl. So I don't know what that looks like when you're looking at them and what the future is. But I know in my house, I have 3 household leaders in my home. Regardless of what kind of leader they are, they will lead 3 homes. And so when I look at them in that way, it genuinely changes the way I think about them. So you don't want them to think negative about themselves, but I also want them to not do a lot of things for them, let them figure it out. We laugh and say, I should never have to bring groceries in ever, because I have 3 boys. I should never ever have to open a door because I have 3 boys. Like we laugh about that. It's like, that's why I have boys. And I tell them that all the time, but I have to look at it as I'm raising 3 dads, 3 men, and look at it that way. What do I want them to be when they're older? And so looking at it through those lenses does kind of make it a little different when you are even disciplining them, or, trying to not take away the strong-willed out of one of them, or trying to get the other one to speak up. You're telling them, like, they'll say, why does mama not say the blessing? I was like, I should never have to say the blessing because there are 4 men at my table, and so we talk about that. And so not that I can't and not that I don't, there are times when I do pray for them, but there's times where they know that they're the man and they should do that. They're the spiritual leaders.
Awesome.
I was going to say, like, another thing that we do to try to, I guess, stay kingdom focused. This isn't necessarily about, like, well, it is about their future, but not about, like, their occupations, what they're going to do. But we even look at, like, the classrooms that they're in when school starts. This is something going back, and, like, like, the Lord is actually the one who placed you in that classroom. And so you're there for a reason, and it's, it's our goal to be a blessing to that teacher and love her, and for you to be the student that she doesn't have to worry about is going to do the right thing. You be that one. Or it might be like you're sitting beside somebody who might need a friend, or whatever the reason is. And so I think, like, we try to show them that all the situations that they're in to glorify the Lord. And so, yeah, eventually that's going to lead into all the other things that they do as well.
That's awesome perspective. Keeping that perspective at school, a lot of people say, a lot of people have said things about they have their school verse and their school year, and this is what they do, prayer cards in their thing. But that's something they can relate to, and that's something they understand. And I think when you start doing that, Jennifer, it's something that they recognize every day. It's an easy thing to bring up, and it's something they remember every day. So that one goes, I think, a lot further than a lot of things we try and push to our kids. Excellent tip. One of the other resources that I'm going to send you guys is, it had an Access resource, and that Access resource is basically, so I got the subscription to Access. So I'm going to send you each week. They send out email. Well, it's not an email. Well, I think they send an email too, but it's basically 3 things. It's called 3 things this week that are going on, and they're all current event stuff. So I'm going to send y'all this week's. That way you can kind of see what this website does. The ones I've read have all been phenomenal. They've all been, whoa, this is everything that's going on. I'm up on what's going on. I usually would know about half of what's going on, and half I'm like, I didn't know that was going on. But some of it is silly, as, like, how you said, like, oh, they're telling me what's going on in their life, like I really care, on YouTube. Well, you know what? This Access report has exactly what's going on in their life, because that's what these lunatics are talking about, and that's what they care about. And I'm like, oh, I could be up on so-and-so. And then when she says, Mom, so-and-so, and you could be like, oh yeah, well, by the way, here's the spiritual application for that. Or like, you'll actually know what's going on. So it's a pretty cool resource, but I will admit that's more of like a, all that's as they get a little older. Like, that's more designed to be like a youth thing, but those middle schoolers, they're right there. But like Doc McStuffinland, that's not on this sheet. So sorry. But any other closing thoughts? I didn't know how tonight's convo would go, but I think it's been very challenging for me to hear some great input and ideas from you guys on ways to keep our kids God focused. And so I appreciate all y'all. So any closing remarks before we go? Fantastic. All right. Well, let me pray for us, and then we have one class left. Don't forget, no one sent anything in like that. You have a question about something you want to talk about. Next week's, it's called like Getting It Right, and it kind of just goes over the big picture, making sure we got it together for this journey that now we're not meeting every week. So we have our resources and we go. But if there's anything you want to make sure you get covered, just let me know. Okay. That can be through email. Let me go ahead and pray for us. God, I thank you for this group of wise, godly adults whose goal is to raise their kids in a world that's being bombarded through media and so many things that we know can brainwash our kids. I pray that you give them guidance, discernment, energy. I pray that you give them relationships with one another and other Christian folks where they can talk to them about effective things to do and ministering to their kids. I pray that you'll give us all a passion to raise our kids to be Christ followers and close to you. Help us to have those conversations. Help us to help our kids view you as someone who they should be following because they love and you love them. We thank you, Lord. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye, guys.